All right, guys, we are getting ready to start the rice noodle stir fry. So I'm getting some things prepped the day before so that when it comes time to put everything together, it's gonna go really quickly for me. So the first thing on the recipe in the directions is to make the sauce. So it says in a small bowl, we're gonna whisk together the soy sauce, the brown sugar, the water, and the red chili flakes. It calls for 5 tablespoons of water. 5 tablespoons is actually 1/4 of a cup plus 1 tablespoon. So I went ahead and put 1/4 of a cup in there to save myself the headache of actually measuring out 5 tablespoons of water. So now I only need to do 1 tablespoon of water. Okay, so 5 tablespoons of water, or 1/4 of a cup plus 1 tablespoon. Okay, and then it calls for 1/3 of a cup of soy sauce. Okay, so I'm gonna take my soy sauce and I'm going to add 1/3 of a cup to it. Okay, so again, when we measure liquids, we do eye level. If you don't use your soy sauce at home very often, sediment will form on the bottom, so make sure that you give it a good shake before you use it so you don't have all the yummy goodness settling on the bottom. If you want to make this gluten-free, you can use tamari, which is a gluten-free soy sauce, and then the whole dish would be gluten-free. Okay, so that soy sauce, I'm going to add in my brown sugar. Most sauced Asian dishes do have some sweetening component, whether it's sugar, honey, something like that. It balances out the heat and the salt. Brown sugar is nice because it's a more complex sweet flavor. The reason brown sugar is brown is because there is molasses in it. So it's granulated sugar and molasses essentially. And molasses is a more complex, kind of deep, actually like a bitter flavor. So I'm gonna add 1/4 of a cup of brown sugar to this. Okay, woo, there we go. And my chili flakes, 1/4 of a teaspoon. Now, when I make this at home, even my husband says it's too hot. It's 1/4 of a teaspoon. It's not too hot for me, but it's too hot for him. If you do not like spice, I would honestly just leave it out altogether. And then if people in your family like heat, they can add their own heat when it's done. Okay, if it was up to me, I'd probably put 1/2 teaspoon of chili flakes in this because I do like it hot. But my husband always is like, it's hot, it's hot. Whatever. Okay, so take that, we're gonna mix it together, get all the lumps out, and then this is actually gonna sit in the fridge for me, but you can make it and do this all at once as well. You don't have to make ahead. I just am doing that for time reasons. So mix that all up. It will settle, so before you use it, you're gonna wanna make sure you stir it up again, okay? But if you make it ahead, just cover it, put it in the fridge, you're good to go, okay? Then I'm going to go ahead and get all of my veg ready. Okay, there's not a ton in this, so it's got green onions, ginger, garlic, and you can either cut your own vegetables or you can cheat and buy a bag of coleslaw mix. Okay, this is why I love this recipe because this saves me so much time, especially if I'm trying to do this like after school one night. So a bag of coleslaw mix, and you can get any kind. You can get the broccoli slaw, like any of those. But if you want to make it yourself, a lot of people don't eat a ton of cabbage, so if you buy a whole head of cabbage, it just kind of sits there. All right, so with the green onions, you guys can see, you're actually gonna separate the greens from the whites. The whites are the more oniony flavor, and then the greens are more of like an herbaceous floral component. Okay, so I'm just gonna slice them into rounds. And understand that when they talk about the whites of onions, they don't actually mean just the white part, it's that really thickly packed part of the scallion. That's what this green onion is called, as a scallion. So if you look, even though I'm in the green, okay, it's still really tightly packed. Once the layers start to spread apart, that's when it becomes the green. So any of this tightly packed part is still considered the white of the onion, okay? It still has that more developed onion flavor, okay? So, and these onions, and not all onions are created equal. So some of these I'm gonna get to the greens faster than others. Okay, like these two are now done. This one still has a good bit of green, of white on it. Okay, so there are my onion whites. All right, I'm going to set them aside in one container. All right, And then I'm going to do my onion greens, okay? When you like get a baked potato or something at a restaurant and it comes with quote unquote chives, a lot of places actually use green onions and chives interchangeably. Chives are in the onion family, along with garlic. They are all related, and so they use those things interchangeably because their flavor profiles are similar. Not exact, but similar. Okay, and I love onions. I just think they are amazing, so I never turn down an opportunity to even add extra onion to something. All right, look at all those yummy onions. Okay. All right, so there's all my greens and my whites separated out. Okay. With your ginger, it says to grate it, so you can do this on like a box grater if you want. Oh, it's not where it should be. Where is it? Ah, there it is. Okay, so you can do it like on a box grater. A microplane would be ideal, okay, like the little bitty ones that you use to like zest with. But if you don't have that, like the ones at school are kind of janky. If you have the really tiny holes like you'd use for like Parmesan, that would be ideal. Or again, like I said, a microplane grater. You could also mince it with a knife, but ginger is really stringy, and so the grater just kind of makes it a little easier to do what you're looking for. Okay, try to turn this so you guys can kind of see. Make sure if you're grating it that you do not grate your knuckles off. Ginger is also kind of spicy, so you really get that just all those like deep notes that come from the food. You can see here like it's really fibrous, and so it doesn't all like grate up. But I can pull some of that off, or I can actually take my knife too and break it up that way, because the ginger is so fibrous. Ginger is, again, a root. It grows underground, so you need to make sure that you are peeling it, getting all the dirt and outer skin off before you get all that yummy, spicy yellow goodness from the inside. Okay? All right, so there is my ginger. That's more than enough for my recipe. I think I only need, what, 1/4 of a teaspoon of freshly grated ginger, so that's definitely way more than I need. So that's plenty. All right, I'll put that in another little bowl for myself for my mise en place. All right, and then we are good to go with the ginger. All right, so remember, continuously clear your workstation, keep your station clean and functional. Okay, this is gonna help you in the long run. All right, clear my cutting board off here. All right, and now I'm gonna prep my meat. So, I am using steak for this. I'm using a, this is a flat iron steak. You can use flank steak, you can use skirt steak, you can buy pre-made stir fry meat, you can use pork chop, you can use chicken breast or chicken thigh. Any of that works. But if you look at the meat specifically, okay, you can see there's kind of like this graining in it. There's like lines that run through the meat, okay? And those lines, okay, those are tough. You don't want to like bite through those. So if I were to cut the meat this way, okay, that's the way the lines run in the meat, right? I don't want that. It's gonna get stuck in my teeth. It's gonna be really hard to chew. I want to cut across those lines so that I now have really short fibers in my meat and I'm not like, okay, like a wild animal chewing on my meat, all right? So it's really important to cut across it. It also helps if you cut it at an angle, okay? So cutting it at an angle and across those fibers means that you shorten the fibers and it makes your meat more tender. So literally cutting it affects tenderness, all right? So let's talk about how to do that. All right, so here's my meat. My fibers run this way. They run the length of the meat this way. So I'm gonna be cutting across the meat this way and also at an angle this way to shorten them, okay? So just like before, I have a nice sharp knife. Chef's knives are great for this. Make sure it is sharp. If you need to sharpen your knife, okay, you can use a sharpening steel. okay? This knife is perfectly sharp and it's dirty, so I'm not gonna put it on there. Just cut ginger and onions with it. But you're gonna run it at about a 25-degree angle, 25 to 40-degree angle on either side of your steel. You move the knife, not the steel, okay? And that will help align the blade of your knife, okay? All right, so here we go. Still with my claw, and I'm just going to cut at an angle, and it just shaves that meat off into little thin pieces. I mean, literally no effort required. It just shaves it into beautiful thin slices, okay? And the thinner the slice, the more tender the meat, okay? And you can really see when I cut it like this, you can really see like the veining in the meat, okay? And that shows you why it's so important to cut through that. Otherwise, those fibers, that fibrousness, makes the meat really unpleasant to eat, okay? Now, when I make this, before I actually cook it, I will probably take all of these slices and cut them in half again, just so it's a more manageable size when you're eating. You don't want to be like shoving a huge wad of meat into your mouth. It's not nice to watch people eat like that, okay? But these are super thin slices, guys. I mean, like lunch meat thin we're talking here, okay? Lunch meat, super thin. All right. All right, so it is time to get the meat and stuff going. So I have some of my larger pieces, and I'm just gonna cut them in half. Some of the things I did while we waited here, I got a pot of water going because I need to boil my rice noodles. My wok is going. It is nice and hot, okay? If you do not have a wok is basically a bowl you cook in, okay? So if you do not have a wok, I highly suggest you just use a really, really large, kind of shallow, like saute pan, all right? Something to that effect, okay? So my wok is screaming hot right now. I'm gonna add just a little bit of oil to it. I'm actually gonna take it off the heat to add the oil because I do not want the oil to instantly burn, okay? I'm just gonna take it off the heat for a second to add the oil, all right? My meat, I need to season it really well with salt and pepper, okay? I'm trying to keep my hands clean, so I'm just gonna take this now that I've seasoned it. I'm seasoning it on my cutting board just so I have a lot of space, okay? So I'm gonna actually just take tongs so I can keep my hands clean. All right, my wok, put it back on the heat. I'm just kind of mix it up so that the salt and pepper gets all over. All right, I do not want to crowd the pan. This meat is not super cold. I took it out of the refrigerator about an hour and a half before I cooked it, or before I cut it. So the meat is coming up to room temperature, but it is still colder, obviously, than the pan, so it is going to decrease the pan temperature right away. So I'm not gonna add it all at once, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and throw them in. Okay. We want this to cook quickly. That's what we're looking for, okay? I have another bowl to put my cooked meat in as it comes out, okay? Because these slices are so thin, they pretty much cook as soon as they hit the pan. So I basically, I'll show you, I cook one side, I flip it over, I cook the other side, and it's done. And then I can pull it out of the pan. Okay, and again, this is steak, so it does not have to be cooked all the way through because I cut it fresh. It is freshly cut, therefore there is no bacteria going on in the inside. Okay, so pull those pieces out. I don't want to overcook it, okay? So as soon as they're brown on both sides, okay, I pull them out. Also, they're going to get cooked again. I will put them back in the wok with the vegetables and the noodles, and they're going to get cooked again. So I'm not really worried about them getting super icky. Okay, my water is coming up to a boil for my rice noodles, so I'm gonna go ahead and add them in. Make sure you follow the directions on your rice noodles. This is like a vermicelli with noodle, so it's not as thin, or I'm sorry, this is like a flat rice noodle, like a stir fry noodle. If you're using like rice vermicelli, which is really skinny, it's gonna cook a lot less. But this one, these need to, I bring it to a pot, I let them stand in hot water for 5 minutes. So my water is boiling, all right? Now I'm going to turn off the heat and let them just sit in that hot water for 5 minutes until they get tender, and then I'll drain them because again, they get cooked again in the wok. All right, so my meat is all cooked. It is nice and brown, okay? Again, I did not cook it to death because it's going to get cooked again when we put it back in the wok. My noodles finished cooking. I drained them in a colander and they are sitting in the sink waiting for their turn. So my pan needs a little more oil in it, okay? If at any point like things are smoking or your house is filling up with smoke, turn down the heat. That is your clue. Turn down the heat, okay? This does splatter a good bit of oil, so understand you're gonna have some cleanup to do when this is over, okay? So my pan, I turned it down. Now that I'm cooking vegetables, I don't need the heat so high. So I turned it down from like a medium high to just like a medium. I'm gonna let that oil warm back up. We are gonna start with the whites of the onion, okay, and the coleslaw mix, okay? So I'm gonna throw my onion whites in there and allow them to start going. I don't want them to go very long because they will burn. They're very tiny pieces, okay? And then I'm gonna throw my coleslaw mix right on top, okay? Coleslaw is mostly cabbage. Cabbage has a lot of water in it, okay? So it's going to cook down and get significantly smaller. This is a heat-safe rubber scraper. It's heat-proof like 450, okay? And I'm just gonna let this cook until the cabbage starts to wilt, okay? It's about 2 minutes tops, okay? That just means the cabbage is now changing colors, okay? And it's getting smaller. It's reducing in volume, okay? Cabbage is one of those vegetables that's kind of amazing. It has tons of antioxidants. It's so good for you, and it really doesn't taste like anything. So it really takes on the flavor of whatever you cook it with, which is why I love it in Asian food. That's how I learned to eat cabbage, because I love those flavors. I love the soy, I love the ginger and the garlic. Those are flavors that really just get me excited to eat. And so cabbage, which has a really neutral flavor, absorbs those really strong flavors well, okay? So I'm just stirring it. This is why we call it a stir fry, okay? The bottom of the pan is frying, and I'm constantly changing what is sitting on the bottom of the pan, okay? There are always usually some larger pieces of cabbage, like in a coleslaw bag. So if you wanna break those up or pull them out, cut them up a little smaller, that's fine. They don't really bother me. Okay, but already you guys can see we've been in there for like a minute, and it's already reduced in volume pretty significantly. Okay, so once that's done, then we're going to add the ginger and the garlic, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and just add all the ginger, because I love ginger, but the recipe does technically call for just 1/4 of a teaspoon, and then 2 minced cloves of garlic, so that's about 1/2 teaspoon of garlic, okay? But again, garlic is one of those things, I don't measure it in teaspoons, I measure it with my heart. I love garlic. And garlic is really good for you. It naturally lowers cholesterol. Like, garlic is just a great food. It tastes good and it's good for you. Same with ginger. It tastes delicious and it's good for you, okay? So give those another good stir. Let them start to warm through so you can smell them. They become really aromatic and you can smell them, so that's important. Right? And the coleslaw is continuing to cook down. It's continuing to get smaller and smaller. All right. You can add any vegetables you want to this. throw in broccoli, throw in peas, mushrooms, whatever you like. You can really add anything to it, honestly. All right? So I'm gonna add the noodles back in. So I drain them, all the water is drained off. Okay, so I'm gonna add them back in. They're hot, 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 hot. Okay, all right. And I'm gonna take my sauce. Remember I said that sugar is going to settle on the bottom, so make sure you give it a good stir before you put it back in, whether you make it the day before or whatever. Okay, give that sugar a good stir. Okay, get it all reduced off the bottom. If you wanted to make this with something lower on the glycemic index, you could use honey instead of brown sugar. Honey is lower on the glycemic index. Okay, and therefore it's a better option for people who are watching your sugar intake. You can hear the sauce. So that sauce now with all that in there, it's gonna boil real quick and get nice and thick. Okay, I'm gonna take my meat, add it back in, all right? And I'm just gonna give everything a good stir, guys. And mix it all up, vegetables, noodles, meat, all of that, okay? You can hear it boiling, that's the sauce down there. It's reducing, it's gonna get thick, okay? And coat everything, okay, like you typically think of with a sauce. So don't turn the heat down, let the heat do its magic and evaporate out the water, because remember we added water to that sauce. The reason we added water to that sauce was so that it could dissolve the sugars, okay, and that it would allow it to spread more evenly once we cooked it, and for this exact reason. So there was something to evaporate when the time came, okay? We needed that extra water to help with the amount of heat that's in this pan right now. All right, and there we go. So I'm just gonna keep stirring this until I basically see all of the liquid gone off the bottom, okay? So there's really almost no liquid left, all right? So, all right, I'm gonna turn my heat off. I'm gonna add a good handful of green onions in here just like this, okay? Again, those green onions they bring a bunch of brightness, okay, and freshness to this dish that's kind of like a sweet and salty, okay, and a little more color since it's kind of uniformly brown, all right? And then when you go to serve it, okay, just grab a nice bowl, scoop it right out, okay? Okay. Throw a few more green onions on top. And there you have it. Oh, it smells so good, guys. Again, this is a favorite in our house. We eat this like for real for dinner, like at least once a month. All right, hope you enjoyed it.